The early days of powered flight were filled with exhilaration and peril. Technology advanced with astounding speed, from wooden struts and bicycle wheels to jet engines in less than half a century. Air travel brought continents together and opened a world of possibilities. The story of aviation is about the mechanics, the pilots, the inventors, and the thrill-seekers. It's a story of ingenuity and perseverance, of a dream that refused to die. The early years of the 20th century were a time of discovery and wonder in the world of aviation. People watched in awe as pilots entered a domain previously reserved for birds. With courage, skill, and sheer bravado, pioneer aviators notched up a long line of record-breaking flights using innovative technology that still astounds today. The men and women present at the birth of aviation continue to inspire. Ignoring the naysayers, they risked their lives to bring us the magic of flight. In the early days of aviation, there was no limit to the imagination of some inventors. Not all prototypes were successful, but it was only a matter of time before mankind spread its wings and launched into the sky. A French sea captain who experimented with gliders in the mid-19th century wrote, "In spite of me, it drew forward into the wind. Notwithstanding my resistance, it tended to rise. Thus I've discovered the secret of the bird, and I comprehend the whole mystery of flying." It was a mystery that obsessed ancient travellers who dreamed of voyaging in winged contraptions. Elaborate designs document this desire, transforming man into bird with the addition of sail-like wings. Not surprisingly, the prototypes never flew, but each added to the sum of human knowledge. Artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci was the most famous early aircraft designer. The medieval polymath drew up blueprints for many inventions in his meticulously detailed diaries, including a helicopter and a hang glider. Da Vinci was particularly fascinated with birds, producing a study in 1505 called Codex on the Flight of Birds, in which he noted that the centre of gravity in a flying bird did not coincide with its centre of pressure. The Codex also included several flying machine designs, but when the great inventor built them, they failed to launch. Da Vinci was a man far ahead of his time. His paper designs highlight his incredible scientific skills and ability to think in 3 dimensions. As well as flying machines, Da Vinci designed a giant parachute, foreshadowing a technology that was still 200 years away from becoming a reality. In 1783, in front of the French royal family, a balloon designed by the Montgolfier brothers made the first recorded manned flight. The English, a haughty nation, arrogate to themselves the empire of the sea. The French, a buoyant nation, make themselves masters of the air, said the future Louis XVIII. Joseph and Etienne Montgolfier were from a family of paper manufacturers. They shrewdly married solid engineering principles with beautiful design, making their balloon ascents an eye-catching experience. The Montgolfier prototype balloon was made from paper lined with alum for fireproofing and held together by 2,000 buttons. The sight of humans sailing through the air was remarkable enough to 18th century Parisians. But to add to the wonder, the Montgolfier brothers commissioned their balloon to be an artwork. The beauty of balloons drifting through the air was undeniable, but it was a dangerous pastime. In 1785, Pierre Roman and Jean-François de Rosier became the first people to die in a ballooning accident when they crashed to Earth in a hydrogen-fueled fire. 12 years later, Frenchman André-Jacques Garnerin became the first person to make a successful parachute descent from a balloon. His canvas umbrella contraption brought him safely to Earth from a height of 3,000 feet. Ballooning technology continued to improve, with aeronauts turning to rubber-coated silk as the material of choice. Slung beneath the huge envelope in a wicker gondola, pilots added hydrogen to the envelope to ascend. As hydrogen is lighter than air, the gas displaced air molecules and lifted the balloon higher. To descend, the pilots simply opened valves and released hydrogen. Balloon ascents were a popular spectator sport in the 19th century, but some balloonists raised the ire of farmers whose crops were trampled by people eager to get close to a landing. In 1873, French aeronaut Jules Dufour and his wife made an unscheduled landing into stormy seas when their craft, the Neptune, was swept out over the ocean. Fortunately, fishermen rescued them. A talented scientist, Dufour invented a scheme to steer balloons using sails and drag ropes, paving the way for future experiments in controlled flight. Artists of the 19th century looked to the future and came up with their own versions of flying machines. And the military found new uses for balloons, with Thaddeus Lowe carrying out reconnaissance in a Union Army balloon during the American Civil War. One man who observed the fascinating spectacle was a visitor from Germany, Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin. Early aeronauts were at the mercy of air currents, with ascending and descending the only part of the flight they could control. After observing the first balloon ascension, American scientist and statesman Benjamin Franklin wrote to his friend Sir Joseph Banks, "These machines must always be driven by the winds. Perhaps mechanic art may find easy means to give them progressive motion." By the mid-19th century, aeronautical inventors were closing in on the technology that would provide progressive motion. In 1852, Henry Giffard flew the first flight of a steerable balloon, managing 17 miles at a top speed of 5 miles an hour. However, the craft's steam-powered engine was too slow to control the vehicle. Alberto Santos Dumont demonstrated the maneuverability of airships by taking his gasoline-powered craft on a flight around the Eiffel Tower, for which he was awarded the Deutsch Prize in 1901. German army officer Count von Zeppelin was determined to put Germany at the forefront of airship development. He used his own money to build the Luftschiff Zeppelin, or LZ-1. Powered by twin Daimler motors, it flew for 20 minutes on July 2, 1900. It was the beginning of an era of glory for German aviation. Zeppelin's inventions inspired public support, and he was able to finance future airships through donations and a lottery. But like all aviators of the era, Zeppelin struggled to keep his monster airship under control. In 1908, his Zeppelin LZ-4 was caught in a storm and crashed, injuring 4 people. The disaster virtually bankrupted the Count, but with public support he persevered with his airship program and went on to greater things. Lawrence Hargrave emigrated to Australia from England as a 15-year-old with his family. He worked as an engineer and an astronomical observer before inheriting his father's fortune and devoting his life to aeronautical research. On the 12th of November 1894, at Stanwell Park Beach near Sydney, Hargrave used 4 box kites tied together to lift himself from the ground. He ascended 16 feet in a wind speed of 21 miles per hour. Aviators looking to improve the lift-to-drag ratio of early gliders eagerly followed Hargrave's breakthrough. A pioneer who used both kites and airships in an innovative way was photographer George Lawrence. Lawrence designed his own panoramic cameras and used a string of 7 kites to hoist the equipment aloft, from where it took images of the Earth up to 2,000 feet above the ground. Lawrence activated the camera shutters by sending an electrical current through the kite's strings. When the shutter released, a small parachute fluttered down, signalling that the photo had been taken and the camera could be brought down and reloaded.
Discover the past with exclusive history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all from History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to explore everything, from the wonders of ancient Pompeii and the mystery of the princes in the tower to the life of Anne Boleyn and D-Day. Sign up via the link in the description.
But it was two brothers from Midwestern America who were to have the greatest impact on the world of aviation. Wilbur and Orville Wright grew up in Dayton, Ohio, towards the end of the 19th century. Orville was the more mechanically minded of the two, while Wilbur loved the intellectual stimulation of study. Their mother, Susan, taught Orville and Wilbur how to make their own inventions. Aged 8 and 12, the boys were given a toy helicopter powered with a rubber band. The toy broke, so they built their own. There were 5 children in the family, but Orville and Wilbur were particularly close. Wilbur later wrote, "From the time we were little children, my brother Orville and myself lived together, played together, worked together, and in fact thought together. We usually owned all of our toys in common, talked over our thoughts and aspirations, so that nearly everything that was done in our lives has been the result of conversations, suggestions and discussions between us. As young men, the brothers opened their own bicycle sales and repair shop. The business proved profitable. America was in the grip of a cycling craze, and the Wright brothers designed and manufactured some popular bicycles. The business provided funds for the brothers to indulge in their real passion, aviation. Their sister Catherine took over the business, so Orville and Wilbur could devote more and more time to designing flying machines. Wilbur came up with a plan to use cables to draw the struts and spars of a glider together. Unlike other aeroplane prototypes, the pilot would actually have control. The brothers' initial interest in aviation had been sparked by the achievements of inventors such as Otto Lilienthal. The German gliding enthusiast made several flights, but constantly battled with the tendency of his gliders to pitch down, a characteristic that killed him in 1896 when he fell 17 meters and broke his spine. The Wright brothers agreed with Lilienthal. The gliding experience was the best way to develop flying techniques that could be used with powered flight. But the poor lift of the gliders led them to suspect that the equation being relied on by Lilienthal and others was wrong. Their own experiments confirmed this, so they built a 6-foot wind tunnel to test various sized wings and balance lift against drag. In this way, they discovered that long, narrow wings provided a far better lift-to-drag ratio than the broader wings used previously. Through trial and error, Wilbur and Orville progressed from flying the glider as a kite to manned flights. The 1902 glider contained a movable rear rudder connected to the wing warping system, controlled by a hip cradle. With the problem of pilot control finally solved, the brothers were ready to add power. On the 23rd of March 1903, they applied for a patent for their flying machine. The biggest problem was finding an engine light enough for the glider. None of the manufacturers the Wrights contacted were able to make one to their specifications. So the brothers decided to make their own. Their shop mechanic, Charlie Taylor, took just 6 weeks to build the lightweight aluminium design. On the 17th of December 1903, they put their powered glider to the test. On the 17th of December 1903, they put their powered glider to the test. The wind was gusting at 30 miles an hour, and they were flying into a stiff wind. Orville took off, and in 40 feet he was off the ground. At that same moment, John Daniels took the historic, famous photograph. The plane in the stiff wind proved difficult for Orville to fly, but he was determined to stay in the air as long as he could. He was in the air for 8 seconds, 10 seconds, 12 seconds later, 120 feet from the starting point, Orville landed the plane at the number 1 stone marker. It was only 12 seconds, 120 feet, but that was the first time man was able to break those bonds with the Earth with a powered flyer. Orville and Wilbur later wrote, "We realized the difficulties of flying in so high a wind, but estimated that the added dangers in flight would be partly compensated for by the slower speed in landing." The brothers made 3 more flights, with Wilbur piloting the flyer more than 800 feet. Unfortunately, when they put the machine down to take a rest, a gust of wind blew it over and smashed it beyond repair. It never flew again. But Orville and Wilbur had already flown into the history books. For the next 2 years they refined their designs until developing the Flyer 5, the first aircraft able to take off and land under pilot control. The patent the brothers took out in 1906 covered the method of varying wing angle to control an aircraft, and they fought several court battles against other aviators who incorporated this into their aircraft design without paying royalties. The brothers negotiated successful contracts with the French syndicate and the American Army, and gave public flights around the world to publicize their aircraft. Other aviators, including Louis Blériot, were awestruck by the Wright brothers' ability to control the aeroplanes. But although Orville and Wilbur had made great progress in aeronautical design, flying was still a perilous business. On the 17th of September 1908, Orville took Army Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge as his passenger on a flight at a United States Army base at Fort Myer, Virginia. The propeller split in mid-flight, and the Wright flyer plummeted to the ground, killing Selfridge and badly injuring Orville. Typically, Orville's main concern was not of going back into the air, but whether he would recover in time to complete the Army test flights. Sadly, the Wright brothers' collaboration came to an end in 1912, when Wilbur died of typhoid, aged just 45. At the Smithsonian Institution, an inscription says of the pair, "By original scientific research, the Wright brothers discovered the principles of human flight. As inventors, builders and flyers, they further developed the aeroplane, taught man to fly, and opened the era of aviation." Well north of Kill Devil Hill, on the remote banks of the Lake of Gold in Nova Scotia, Scottish-born inventor Alexander Bell was carrying out his own aeronautical experiments at his Canadian estate. The inventor of the telephone, Dr. Bell, was fascinated by aviation and became a founding member of the Aerial Experiment Association in 1907, together with Glenn Curtis, Casey Baldwin, J.A.D. McCurdy, and Thomas Selfridge. In 1908, the association launched Red Wing, its first heavier-than-air machine, with Casey Baldwin at the controls. It crashed on the first flight, and they moved on to White Wing and then Junebug, which Curtis successfully flew a distance of 5,090 feet. On the 23rd of February 1909, McCurdy took off from the frozen lake to pilot the association's most ambitious craft, Silver Dart, on the first powered aircraft flight in Canadian history. Like the Junebug, the Silver Dart's V8 engine was designed by Curtis, but the lightweight design attracted the ire of the Wright brothers, who sued him for infringing their patent. After several appeals, the Wrights finally won their case in 1913. A motorcycle manufacturer, Glenn Curtis, was one of America's most important aeronautical designers and pilots. The winner of many air races, Curtis became closely involved in designing aircraft for the American military, and he was a pioneer in the design and manufacture of seaplanes and flying boats. He also developed the first aircraft to take off from a ship. A pilot of considerable skill, Curtis had the honor of becoming the first person to receive a pilot's license from the Aero Club of America in 1911. When the world went to war in 1914, few traditional military men saw the potential of flying machines. But one who did was Italian officer Giulio Douhet. "A new weapon has come forth," he said. "The sky has become the new battlefield." It wasn't long before rapid strides in aviation technology were proving him right. The previous century, Thaddeus Lowe's balloon had provided reconnaissance information for the Union forces during the Civil War. Now a new breed of aircraft was taking to the skies loaded with deadly weapons. Still just flimsy scraps of wood and fabric, the first generation of fighter aeroplanes were nevertheless fast and maneuverable. But their effectiveness depended on a new breed, the fighter pilot. Keen eyesight, stamina, and fast reflexes were essential, and even those traits would not necessarily be enough to save the pilot from a fiery death. The end of the war saw a huge drop in aircraft production in the United States, with the annual figure dropping from 14,000 in 1918 to 263 in 1922. The French government continued to commission aircraft and used the surplus to subsidize a new field of commercial aviation. Civil flying resumed in 1919, and passenger services were established for short routes within Europe and America, usually made up of ex-military aeroplanes flown by ex-military pilots. Conditions were far from luxurious, and one carrier, Aircraft Transport and Travel, issued passengers with thick coats, helmets, goggles and gloves, and sometimes hot water bottles. Over the past century, the airline industry has grown from an experimental mode of transportation to a major part of the world's transportation system. Modern air transport has certainly come a long way from its humble beginnings. Passengers travel today in air-conditioned comfort, in spacious cabins, where they can rest and relax and arrive refreshed at their destination. The experience today can be further enhanced by the next-generation HD in-flight entertainment, wireless internet, and smartphone connectivity. Emerging technologies are ushering in more fuel-efficient, comfortable, and exotic aircraft. Get ready for the future of flight. Man is a fortunate species. Over thousands of years, our intelligence has given us tools and technology, art and science, society and civilization. We now possess a treasure house of man's great achievements. There have been many advancements in medical history, and some of the biggest medical breakthroughs have been the discovery of penicillin and the discovery of vaccinations. Entire careers, innumerable dead ends, and uncountable sums of money solving health problems are abridged with the benefit of hindsight into stories of single moments and heroic individual researchers. Many of the breakthroughs of major medical discoveries of the last decade are steps on a continuum of discovery and progress, important midpoints in research and treatment. To gain a proper understanding and appreciation for the evolution of modern medicine, knowledge of ancient civilization is essential. The ancient Egyptians, like the ancient Greeks and Romans, have provided modern historians with a great deal of knowledge and evidence about their attitude towards medicine and the medical knowledge that they had. This evidence has come from the numerous papyruses found in archaeological searches. Like prehistoric man, some of the beliefs of the Egyptians were based on myths and legend. However, beliefs also came from the increasing knowledge of the human anatomy and plain common sense. When there was no obvious reason for an illness, many ancient Egypt doctors and priests believed the disease was caused by spiritual beings. When no one could explain why someone had a disease, spells and magical potions were used to drive out the spirits. Despite this use of remedies that come from a lack of knowledge, the ancient Egyptians also developed their knowledge as a result of education. Ancient papyrus inform us that the ancient Egyptians were discovering things about how the human body worked, and they knew that the heart, pulse rates, blood, and air were important to the workings of the human body. A heart that beat feebly told doctors that the patient had problems. Many foundations of modern Western medicine lie in classical Greece. Greek medicine departed from the divine and mystical and moved towards observation and logical reasoning. These ideas spread throughout the Mediterranean world and as far east as India, and their influence has remained strong in the West to this day. Not all ancient Greeks turned to physicians when ill. Many still turned to the gods. The god Apollo was consulted at a temple in Delphi, and by the 6th century BC, many turned to the god Asclepius for help. Places called Asclepia were built for those in poor health. These were like temples, and here people came to bathe, sleep, and meditate. Patients were encouraged to sleep as it was believed that during sleep they would be visited by Asclepius and his 2 daughters. A visit by these 3 was expected to cure all ailments. The most famous of all ancient Greek doctors was Hippocrates, born in 460 BC. He became known as the founder of medicine and was regarded as the greatest physician of his time. He based his medical practice on observations and on the study of the human body. He held the belief that illness had a physical and a rational explanation, and he rejected the views of his time that considered illness to be caused by superstitions and by possession of evil spirits and disfavour of the gods. Hippocrates held the belief that the body must be treated as a whole and not just a series of parts. He accurately described disease symptoms and was the first physician to actually describe the symptoms of pneumonia as well as epilepsy in children. He believed in the natural healing process of rest, a good diet, fresh air, and cleanliness. He noted that there were individual differences in the severity of disease symptoms and that some individuals were better able to cope with their disease and illness than others. He was also the first physician that held the belief that thoughts, ideas, and feelings come from the brain and not the heart as others of his time believed. Hippocrates travelled throughout Greece practicing his medicine. He founded a medical school on the island of Kos where he was born and began teaching his ideas. He soon developed an oath of medical ethics for physicians to follow. The Hippocratic Oath is taken by physicians today as they begin their medical practice. Science and technology in ancient and medieval India covered all the major branches of human knowledge and activities, including medical science and surgery. Around 800 BC, the first compendium on medicine and surgery was compiled in ancient India. Hindu medicine is as ancient as Hindu civilization. Ancient India was a land of sages, saints and seers, as well as a land of scholars and scientists. Considered by many scholars to be the oldest healing science, Ayurveda is a holistic approach to health that is designed to help people live long, healthy and well-balanced lives. The term Ayurveda is taken from the Sanskrit words Ayas, meaning life or lifespan, and Veda meaning knowledge. It has been practiced in India for at least 5,000 years and has only recently become popular in Western cultures. The contemporary form of Ayurvedic medicine is mostly derived from several sacred Indian texts, which were written in Sanskrit between 1500 BC and 400 AD. The basic principle of Ayurveda is to prevent illness by maintaining balance in the body, mind and consciousness through proper drinking, diet and lifestyle, as well as herbal remedies. Traditional Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. Bear in mind that apart from the recorded documents, much of what is said about the origins of Chinese medicine is more legend than history. According to the legend, the origins of traditional Chinese medicine is traced back to the 3 legendary emperors or mythical rulers, Fu Zi, Shen Nong, and Hung Di. The first written documentation on traditional Chinese medicine is the Hung Di Ni Qing, the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. Hung Di Ni Qing is the oldest medical textbook in the world. Different opinions date the book back to between 800 BCE and 200 BCE. The textbook lays a primary foundation for the theories of Chinese medicine, which extensively summarizes and systematizes the previous experience of treatment and theories of medicine. The underlying principle of medieval medicine was the theory of humours. This was derived from the ancient medical works and dominated all Western medicine until the 19th century. The theory stated that within every individual there were 4 humours, or principal fluids: black bile, yellow bile, phlegm and blood. These were produced by various organs in the body, and they had to be in balance for a person to remain healthy. Too much phlegm in the body, for example, caused lung problems, and the body tried to cough up the phlegm to restore a balance. The balance of humours in humans could be achieved by diet, medicines, and by bloodletting using leeches. The use of herbs dovetailed naturally with this system, the success of herbal remedies being ascribed to their action upon the humours within the body. The use of herbs also drew upon the medieval Christian doctrine of signatures, which stated that God had provided some form of alleviation for every ill, and that these things, be they animal, vegetable, or mineral, carried a mark or a signature upon them that gave an indication of their usefulness. Frenchman René Laennec has been known in the scientific and medical world for his invention of the stethoscope in 1816. Born in Quimper, France, he studied medicine under the wing of his uncle Guillaume François Laennec at the University of Nantes. He later became the head of medicine at the Hôpital de la Charité and a professor of medicine at the Collège de France before dying of tuberculosis in 1826. During this point of history, the most common means for diagnosing heart conditions was to simply place one's ear over the patient's chest to listen for murmurs, vibrations, or deep rumblings that can indicate various heart and chest problems. Laennec recognized that factors such as the patient's weight and even gender affected the results of the traditional process of chest percussion and listening. Excess fat between the outer chest and heart region made hearing the sounds within the chest cavity extremely hard to hear without amplification. In addition, placing one's head against the chest of a female patient was very awkward for both the patient and the doctor. Laennec's solution was a wooden tube with a small earpiece that, when placed between the patient's chest and the doctor's ear, the sound from the chest cavity was amplified considerably. This simple device, inspired by a child's toy, was very effective, but met considerable resistance in the medical world due to how deeply engraved the traditional methods were in clinical practice. His design was improved in 1851 by Arthur Leard and George Kaman into the binaural stethoscope used in modern medical practices. Rudolf Virchow was one of the 19th century's foremost leaders in medicine and pathology. He was also a public health activist, social reformer, politician, and anthropologist. He had a strong interest in natural science. Virchow's greatest accomplishment was his observation that a whole organism does not get sick, only certain cells or groups of cells. In 1855, at the age of 34, he published his now famous aphorism, Omnis cellula e cellula. Every cell stems from another cell. With this approach, Virchow launched the field of cellular pathology. He stated that all diseases involve changes in normal cells. That is, all pathology ultimately is cellular pathology. This insight led to major progress in the practice of medicine. It meant that disease entities could be defined much more sharply. Diseases could be characterized not merely by a group of clinical symptoms, but by typical anatomic changes. Pathologic anatomy, in addition to its great scientific merit, had tremendous practical consequences. If the physician was able to find out what anatomic changes had occurred in a patient, he could make a much more accurate diagnosis of the disease than he could in the past. This also empowered physicians to give more precise treatment and prognosis. In many of his speeches, Virchow stated that the practice of medicine in Germany should shift away from being a largely theoretical activity. He advocated for the study of microscopic pathological anatomy, for research to be performed by physicians, the importance of making systematic clinical observations, and the performance of animal experimentations. Virchow's many discoveries include finding cells in bone and connective tissue and describing substances such as myelin. While Virchow in Germany was developing the new science of cellular pathology, Louis Pasteur in France was developing the new science of bacteriology. Virchow fought the germ theory of Pasteur. He believed that a diseased tissue was caused by a breakdown of order within cells, and not from an invasion of a foreign organism. We know today that Virchow and Pasteur were both correct in their theories on the causality of disease. If one were to choose among the greatest benefactors of humanity, Louis Pasteur would certainly rank at the top. He solved the mysteries of rabies, anthrax, chicken cholera, and silkworm diseases, and contributed to the development of the first vaccines. He debunked the widely accepted myth of spontaneous generation, thereby setting the stage for modern biology and biochemistry. He described the scientific basis for fermentation, winemaking, and the brewing of beer. Pasteur's work gave birth to many branches of science, and he was single-handedly responsible for some of the most important theoretical concepts and practical applications of modern science. Pasteur's achievements seem widely diverse at first glance, but a more in-depth look at the evolution of his career indicates that there is a logical order to his discoveries. He is revered for possessing the most important qualities of a scientist: the ability to survey all the known data and link the data for all possible hypotheses, the patience and drive to conduct experiments under strictly controlled conditions, and the brilliance to uncover the road to the solution from the results. In 1928, bacteriologist Alexander Fleming made a chance discovery from an already discarded contaminated petri dish. The mold that had contaminated the experiment turned out to contain a powerful antibiotic, penicillin. However, though Fleming was credited with the discovery, it was over a decade before someone else turned penicillin into the miracle drug for the 20th century. 12 years later, in 1940, the second year of World War II, two scientists at Oxford University were researching promising projects in bacteriology that could possibly be enhanced or continued with chemistry. Australian Howard Florey and German refugee Ernst Chain began working with penicillin. Using new chemical techniques, they were able to produce a brown powder that kept its antibacterial power for longer than a few days. They experimented with the powder and found it to be safe. Needing the new drug immediately for the war front, mass production started quickly. The availability of penicillin during World War II saved many lives that otherwise would have been lost due to bacterial infections in even minor wounds. Penicillin also treated diphtheria, gangrene, pneumonia, syphilis, and tuberculosis. Though Fleming discovered penicillin, it took Florey and Chain to make it a usable product. Though both Fleming and Florey were knighted in 1944, and all three of them, Fleming, Florey and Chain, were awarded the 1945 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, Fleming is still credited for discovering penicillin. In America in the 1950s, summertime was a time of fear and anxiety for many parents. This was a season when children by the thousands became infected with the crippling disease poliomyelitis or polio. This burden of fear was lifted forever when it was announced that Dr. Jonas Salk had developed a vaccine against the disease. Salk became world famous overnight, but his discovery was a result of many years of painstaking research. After completing medical school and his internship, Salk returned to the study of influenza, the flu virus. World War II had begun, and public health experts feared a replay of the flu epidemic that had killed millions in the wake of the First World War. The development of vaccines controlled the spread of flu after the war, and the epidemic of 1919 did not reoccur. In 1947, Salk accepted an appointment to the University of Pittsburgh Medical School. While working there with the National Foundation of Infantile Paralysis, Salk saw an opportunity to develop a vaccine against polio and devoted himself to this work for the next 8 years. In 1955, Salk's years of research paid off. Human trials of the polio vaccine effectively protected the subject from the polio virus. When news of the discovery was made public on April 12, 1955, Salk was hailed as a miracle worker. He further endeared himself to the public by refusing to patent the vaccine. He had no desire to profit personally from the discovery, but merely wished to see the vaccine disseminated as widely as possible. Salk's vaccine was composed of killed polio virus, which retained the ability to immunize without running the risk of infecting the patient. A few years later, a vaccine made from live poliovirus was developed, which could be administered orally, while Salk's vaccine required injection. Further, there was some evidence that the killed vaccine failed to completely immunize the patient. In the US, public health authorities elected to distribute the live oral vaccine instead of Salk's. Tragically, the preparation of live virus infected some patients with the disease, rather than immunizing them. Since the introduction of the original vaccine, the few new cases of polio reported in the United States were probably caused by the live vaccine, which was intended to prevent them. In countries where Salk's vaccine has remained in use, the disease has been virtually eradicated. As we look back, it is easy to see that modern medical science has indeed made incredible advances and contributions which have alleviated much pain and suffering, and will likely continue to do so in the future with advancements in stem cell research, surgical technique, prosthetics, subcellular intervention, metabolomics, and more. Despite a great deal of resistance to stem cell research outside of the medical community, advances have continued, and in most cases without the need for embryonic stem cells. Tests on mice for treatment of diabetes have shown that stem cell therapy can indeed stimulate the regeneration of lost beta cells to produce insulin. Although more wishful thinking than practical at the moment, stem cell therapy is likely to begin asserting itself as a major medical treatment for a multitude of diseases in the next 10 to 20 years. The advancement in prosthetics is almost mind-boggling, again something beyond the capability of alternative medicine. Gene therapy is coming, although it might be 10 to 20 years down the road before we see any significant number of practical applications, but they're coming. But gene therapy is just the tip of the iceberg. Metabolomics is the study of all of the byproducts produced by your body's myriad metabolic processes. These metabolites are easily found in the urine and blood and provide a wealth of information as to the state of your health. And more importantly, where your health is headed. Man is a fortunate species. Over thousands of years, our intelligence has given us tools and technology, art and science, society and civilization. We now possess a treasure house of man's great achievements.
you.